Yes, guys, straight out of my nightmares, Christmas in July. And this is where we find ourselves with Doctor Who, The Chimes of Midnight. Now, I don't hate this audio dramatization of Doctor Who. In fact, I have mentioned it several times. It is my favorite. Up there, all-time Doctor Who, no matter if it's the show, books, the audio dramas. I've not read any of the prose or the comics, any of that type of stuff, but The Chimes of Midnight is, without a doubt, my favorite Doctor Who. And it is also followed by another great Doctor Who, Seasons of Fear, which we will cover next. So why is Chimes of Midnight so great to me? Well, first off, it takes place, it's not convoluted, like they're going to different places, meeting new enemies that you gotta, assess in your mind. Yes, there is a new enemy, but it's very straightforward. And I have to point out that this is the climax of Charlie Pollard's appearance in Doctor Who. It's not her final appearance, but this is when she finally realizes that she is an anomaly. Even though the Doctor will not discuss it with her until we get to, Neverland. But since Minuet in Hell, she does realize that she is dead to, I guess, certain aliens or demons, whatever you want to call them, but she's not really questioning it. She still wants to get to Singapore, but the Doctor is still kind of holding her back. She's not questioning it, that's the thing. And what I also love about this episode, yes, it is a Christmas special, but the Christmas factor really is kind of pushed to the side. Yes, it does take place during Christmas. Actually, it's an Edwardian Christmas. But what stands out with this one is that you've got such a great cast of characters that all work together. There's not that many of them. You have the Doctor, you have Charlie, you have the chauffeur, the lady's maid, the cook, and you have the two that are kind of either the antagonist and protagonist. You have Edith Thompson, the protagonist, and then you have Mr. Shaughnessy, who is kind of the antagonist butler, but it's not really his fault, as he is possessed by the house known as Edward Grove. So as we start off with Chimes of Midnight, Charlie and the Doctor arrive in this pantry or lauda. We don't really say the word lauda here in the States, but it's kind of a pantry. And Charlie accidentally knocks over some raspberry jam. They go exploring. Everything's dark. That's the thing. It's almost like time is still where they are, but they don't know. They don't realize that yet. They think they've arrived somewhere. Everyone's asleep. They start exploring, and things start not connecting very well. When they reach the kitchen area, they find that, one, of course, there's nobody there. It's dark, but all of the plates are still sitting in water, and Charlie thinks that it's cold water, and she remembers back to the time that she was growing up and that her father would never have had a scullery maid leave dishes soaking in cold water, but the water's still hot. And at the same time, the Doctor is, interested, but he's pondering the fact that what kind of danger are they in? If time is standing still, how did they get here? And the other point that we have is that on the flip side of things, we meet our protagonist, Edith Thompson, who is singing happily about the Yuletides of Christmas. The only Christmas song that she knows is Hark the Herald Angels Sing, but she only knows certain parts of the words like Glory to the Newborn King, Peace on Earth. She hums the rest, and then she gets God and Singers, rectum style, whatever the hell. And Shaughnessy comes in, who's the butler, tells her to stop screaming you can sing, but don't scream at the top of your lungs. She's young. She's happy. But he also has to correct her by saying that it's sinners, not singers. And we come to find out, of course, during this time, is that a lot of especially the lower class people, whether they're male or female, were not educated. They're very illiterate. And the fact that Edith Thompson does know some of the words to this is actually very, very good. But she doesn't even know how to write her own name. So Shaughnessy, and this is what we see, that Shaughnessy, yes, is kind of an asshole. I mean, he's an old-fashioned butler. He's not an Alfred Butler. He's not. He's just kind of a jerk. But he does take pity on her, and he does write her name on the table, which is, I guess, covered in dust. He makes it out like this pantry kitchen is just disgusting. It's dust all over the place, which I'm sorry. I don't know what it's like back in, what is this, 1906? But why is it that the kitchen is getting so dusty? It's not dust. Let's just say it's more flour. That's what I'm picturing in my head. But he writes her name out, and then she wants him to write his name, but he doesn't. He just tells her to get back to her work and to remind her that she is nothing, she is nobody. So we do find that the Doctor and Charlie, back on the flip side, find a plum pudding, and the Doctor loves plum pudding, so he gets himself, a plate and cuts himself a slice and gets some brandy butter on that. And, of course, Charlie's just like, I don't understand what's going on. That all the food is here. It's like everyone got ready for the start of Christmas Day at midnight, but they all just left. And the Doctor's like, well, maybe they're still here. We just can't see them or interact with them. So they go off again to try to find, some kind of clue as to where they are. On the flip side, and yes, I'm going to stop saying flip side soon, guys. So we meet Mrs. Baddeley, the cook, who is talking to Mr. Shaughnessy, and he brings up the fact that her pudding has a wonderful scent, and the only thing that you hear her chopping, it sounds like she's just either chopping celery or carrots. That's the only thing you hear that she's chopping. So I don't know really, I've never made a plum pudding, but in my head, I'm just like, I don't think there's carrots and celery in there. But of course, though, it's steaming as we speak, and when she calls Edith from the scullery up to help her take it off the stove or whatever, Edith kind of gets like, well, Mr. Shaughnessy told me to clean. And she's like, well, I'm telling you to come out and do this. And of course, Shaughnessy backs up Mrs. Baddeley, who's like, you do what she tells you, and then you can go back to cleaning the pots and pans and all that stuff. And it's really uncomfortable to hear them talk to her like this, because Edith, she's young. She grabs the pot that has the steaming plum pudding and she burns herself. And she's like, what's the matter with you girls? She's an idiot, Mr. Shaughnessy. Use the mitts or something. And it just makes you feel really uncomfortable that people actually talk to other people like this. But of course, this was a very different time. But it's one of those kind of cringe moments. And Edith, is like, oh, Mrs. Baddeley, it's so wonderful. We'll be able to eat this on Christmas Day. Christmas won't be Christmas. Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without one of your plum puddings. And Mrs. Baddeley is like, well, that's not very an original statement, Edith. Everybody says that about my plum pudding. But of course, as we will see later on, everybody will use that constantly. When I first heard that on this audio, I was like, oh my god, how many times are they gonna say this line? Ugh. It just makes sense then, but we'll get to that later. And Edith starts questioning. She's like, but, why is this plum pudding bigger and this one smaller? Because the big one's going upstairs to his lordship and her ladyship, but the small one is going to the staff, but there's more of us than there are of them. And then Shaughnessy's like, that is a wicked statement there, Edith. You should never talk like that. So it just also goes to show that yes, naturally, we don't know. I'm kind of like, well, the bigger pudding makes sense because if it's not just the lordship and ladyship, they may be entertaining guests. So yes, naturally, they would have to have the bigger one. But at the same time, we're never going to be introduced to the lordship and ladyship. We will never meet them at all. Back on the flip side, the Doctor and Charlie make their way to, I guess, the drawing room where, the fireplace is. I guess the dining room is as well. Maybe it's all merged together. And so the Doctor finds a cracker, one of those poppers. I mean, not like, we don't really call them crackers down here. We don't really use crackers down here. We have poppers, which are these little plastic cups that you pull and they pop and everything. But crackers, you take both ends of this almost like candy-like tube and you pull, and You got a cracker. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And the ones in the States, you can get like a little toy or maybe like a little flip book. I believe that there are jokes in the UK. So the Doctor and Charlie pull one, and there's a joke inside and a little paper crown. All come with paper crowns. You're supposed to put on the paper crown. And the Doctor takes his and puts on his paper crown. So Charlie looks at the joke. She hands the joke over to the Doctor, and the Doctor's like, okay, so when is a door not a door? And Charlie's like, when it's a jar. Everyone knows that. And the Doctor's like, well, that's not the answer. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, the answer is, when is a door not a door? When it's a raspberry jam jar. Indicating back when they first arrived, when Charlie broke the jar of raspberry jam. And the Doctor points out that when he went back to put his flashlights back in, all of that mess had been cleaned up, like it vanished. And Charlie looked at her dress that she spilt some on, and it also vanished. So back on the flip side, as Edith is helping Mrs. Baddeley and Shaughnessy is left, we are introduced now to Frederick, the chauffeur. Now, Frederick, in this part, is kind of friendly towards Edith. He's like, oh, Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without one of Mrs. Baddeley's plum puddings, and Edith's like, but you're not supposed to taste it. And he's like, well, I won't. So he's like, Mrs. Baddeley, can I have like a private word with you? And so Mrs. Baddeley sends Edith back out again. But there's also another flip side to this, because as we go back to the same scene, because this scene is played twice, where Frederick comes in, but he's a lot meaner to her the second time around. And if you've ever listened to this audio, you will understand what I'm talking about. The second time he comes in, Edith's like, she can hear the Doctor and Charlie talking, even though they're not there. But she can hear someone talking. And Frederick's basically hear what? I wondered, Mrs. Baddeley, if I could have a private conversation with you. You see that his attitude from her changes from, very gentle and, almost flirtatious to the point that he's like, you are just absolute garbage. Get out of here. So, that's just me, but I think that they did that intentionally. So as Edith goes out, Frederick is talking to Mrs. Baddeley by saying that, we need to talk about what you saw. And Mrs. Baddeley's like, I don't really want to talk about it. That's for his lordship and her ladyship to decide. Because what we find out is that Frederick, the chauffeur, has been having relations with Mary, the lady's maid. Which I guess is scandalous and everything. Humans will be humans, but at the same time, Mrs. Baddeley's like, I knew what you were when you first walked into this manor. You're a veritable monster. And he's like, for God's sake, 'cause it was only a bit of bleeding fun. And so he tries to bribe her off with money. But Mrs. Baddeley's like, I have saved up more than you'll ever earn being here. And I'm a bit more, I can't pronounce it. But anyway, she's saying that I'm richer than you are. But then Frederick's like, you bet you're not as strong as I am. Which she takes as a threat. And in my head, she holds up the kitchen knife to tell him to get out of the kitchen. And Frederick's like, you backed me into a corner. You will regret this. Back on the flip side, in the darkness now, we have the fire in the fireplace. It's not moving. It stands still. And also at the same time, the blizzard outside is raging. From what the Doctor's saying, the blizzard is going on outside, but nothing is moving on the inside. And he points out that even if the windows were double glazed, it would still let the cold in, but it's not cold at all. It's not hot or cold. So I don't know which. There's just a lack of temperature. So Charlie all of a sudden goes stiff. She can hear something. She hears "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" being sung very quietly, but she doesn't know where it's coming from. So the Doctor takes this paper crown, just for some strange reason, throws it into the fire. It, for a split second, eats the paper crown, burns it up, and she can hear the voice getting a little bit louder. So he throws the cracker in there, and it starts getting louder. So then he has this brilliant idea. Let's just take the tablecloth off, and in my head, this is a big dining room table. So he pulls everything off, plates and cups go everywhere, shatters, and he throws it into the fireplace. And the voice is louder. So Charlie knows where it is. So she tells the doctor to follow her back to the scullery or the kitchen. And when they get there, she can hear the voice as if the person's standing right in front of her, and then it stops. So she starts trying to talk to the figure, like, what's, like, hello, you don't have to be afraid of us. And the doctor's like, Charlie, what's going on? And she's like, I don't know, doctor. I just, nothing's happening. But what she can hear is the ticking of a clock, a grandfather clock. And so the doctor's like, I don't hear anything, Charlie. Maybe try to talk to her again. And at that moment, something happens to Charlie. Like, from what the doctor sees, is that she goes rigid. She goes completely still. And in my head, after seeing Stranger Things 4, I now think that Charlie goes, rigid. Her head looks up. Her eyes kind of glaze over that white and everything, kind of like Vecna's getting her or something like that. But nothing more sinister than that. On the flip side, we have Edith washing the pots and everything, and Charlie just magically appears behind her, and she's like, hello, and like Edith drops everything, and she kind of reprimands Charlie, but you shouldn't sneak up on people like that. And then she realizes that she has no authority to tell anybody anything, especially if this young girl might be somebody of importance, and she begs her not to tell the Lord and Lady that she'll be sacked. And Charlie's like, that's not what I'm here for. Was that you singing? She's like, yeah, caterwauling, as Mr. Shaughnessy calls it. And Charlie asks her, who she is, and she's like, well, I'm Edith Thompson. And she looks down at the table, and she sees Edith Thompson on the table. And below that, Charlie's name starts appearing on the wood. And she's like, Charlie Pollard. Edith's like, who is that? And she goes, that's me. And she goes, that's a funny name for a girl. Nothing by it. But then something happens. Like, the scene flits a little bit. And Edith Thompson becomes a bit, in my head, a bit older. And, very tired looking. And she goes, Charlie, there'll be a death here soon. And Charlie gets really confused. She's like, what do you mean? She goes, like, who's going to die? And she goes, I am. And then she goes back to normal by saying, nothing by it. It's a nice name. But then she can hear the doctor's voice saying, Charlie, come back. And then back on the flip side, Charlie breaks out of this hypnosis, and the doctor's like, where were you, Charlie? It's like, I was here with Edith Thompson. Didn't you see me? Well, no, I saw you just go still. You became like everything in this house. I thought I'd lost you. And she's like, what did you see? And she goes, I met the maid. I met Edith Thompson. She told me that there was going to be a death here soon. But then the doctor stops her abruptly. He's like, do you hear that? And she goes, and the doctor's like, what? Charlie's like, what? He goes, there's a ticking. She's like, you can hear the ticking too. And he's like, come on, Charlie, back to the TARDIS, because there are some mysteries I do not want to get involved in. And then you can hear the chimes going off, ding, ding, ding. And the doctor's like, I think that whatever has kept us out has now invited us inside. And then we hear this scream. Now, let's do a little asterisk right here. When I say scream, I'm not talking about a blood-curdling scream that you can get from, like, Halloween, Friday the 13th, stuff like that. No, this is a really bad recording of a girl screaming. It is too mechanical. No one would ever scream this way. So the doctor's like, we've arrived, Charlie. So now they're out of the darkness and into the light. And they're still in the kitchen. And Charlie's like, Doctor, look, it's Edith. And they go over to her, and her head is completely in the sink. And so the doctor grabs Edith, pulls her out of the sink, lays her on the ground. And Charlie's like, I don't understand, Doctor. I was just here with her. There's no way that she could be, could have drowned like this. And all the doors open. It sounds like 4 doors open, and everybody comes in. You have Frederick, you have Mary, you have Shaughnessy, and you have Mrs. Baddeley. And Shaughnessy's like, what's going on here? What's all this racket? And the doctor's like, it's your scullery maid. We found her, trying to commit suicide in the sink. And Mary's like, oh no. And Frederick's like, Mary, it's all right. It's okay if she dies. And so the doctor's trying to resuscitate her, but all that comes out of her mouth is water. And the doctor's like, I don't understand. Her lungs are full of water. There's no way that she could have committed suicide by doing this. You can't just stand over a sink with your head in the water. Eventually your legs will give out and you will fall backwards. But that's not how this was. And so Shaughnessy was thinking that the doctor has he thinks that the doctor is some kind of like detective from Scotland Yard, and he's like, Doctor, I believe that the young girl committed suicide. And so Charlie's like, that's not possible, guys. The girl was murdered. Oh, such a thing in my kitchen, says Mrs. Bradley. Well, I hope it doesn't harm my plum pudding. Well, Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without it. So the doctor's like, so wait a minute, you know who I am? And they're like, yeah, you're the greatest detective of Scotland Yard, and this is your niece, Mrs. Pollard. Which is kind of weird to me, because they automatically go with that. The niece thing doesn't make any sense, because I don't remember them saying that Charlie's the doctor's niece and from Storm Warning up to Invaders of Mars. I mean, she's been his assistant, but not the niece. So that's kind of weird that they jumped to that. I don't know if that was a writing mistake. It just seemed kind of off to me when I first read it. And when we do the transcript, or if you listen to this, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. And so, Shaughnessy is like, I think, Doctor, that you're going to interview us all. And he goes, well, yeah, I can. And he's like, well, I'll be waiting in my butler's chamber until you come calling. And he's like, you have complete free reign of the house. And he's like, staff, return to your duties and assist the doctor with anything that he needs, unless it involves matters concerning the house. So we have something very interesting here. And this could have been a very good whodunit. And in the beginning, it kind of seems that way. Who did it? Was it the chauffeur, the lady's maid, the cook, or the butler? So they go off and do their own things. Well, the doctor and Charlie are kind of pondering, how the heck do they know them? Like, why all of a sudden that they are the greatest detectives of Scotland Yard? And Charlie's like, I kind of wish we were amateur sleuths, kind of like in Agatha Christie's novels. So the doctor's like, you interview the cook, and I'll interview the butler. So they go off. And some of the things that kind of interrupt these portions of the audio is this weird kind of almost like from Juno, from The Grudge in the American, that kind of thing. And we'll get to that in a bit, but we kind of get that kind of breaking of someone either breathing or, I don't know, like maybe they're Juno, I don't know. So the first one we interview is the doctor and Shaughnessy. And the doctor kind of goes off by saying, first of all, did you kill her? And he goes, no, I didn't, doctor. I'm a well-bred butler. I would never have done something like that. And so the doctor asks him who actually is employed here. And he goes, well, there's me, the cook, the chauffeur, and the lady's maid. And he's like, well, have any of the other staff members been homicidal? Any tendencies toward wanting to killing people? And he goes, it's not my place. And then he's like, well, then who's upstairs? And Shaughnessy goes pale, and he goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, who are the people upstairs? There's more than just this bottom floor. He goes, well, it's the Lord and her ladyship. Well, are they crazy and want to kill people? And he goes, it's not my place. We are nobody. We are nothing. Well, I never said that, Shaughnessy. So then he asks, who do you think killed Edith Thompson? And he goes, I believe it was Mrs. Baddeley, the cook. And he goes, why do you think that? Well, sir, she has shifty eyes. He's like, does that help? He goes, well, if we could, arrest every person with shifty eyes that committed a crime, that'd be great, but that doesn't really help me, Shaughnessy. So then Charlie goes and interviews Mrs. Baddeley, which is very interesting because she's fighting with Mary, the lady's maid, because Mrs. Baddeley's telling Mary to go and clean the pots and pans, but Mary's having a fit by saying, that's not my job, that was Edith's job. I'm a lady's maid. I'm not supposed to get my hands dirty. And so she goes off, and Mrs. Baddeley is like, ugh, girls these days. Well, not you, my puppet. Do you want to ask me some questions about your little investigation? She's so condescending. It's so disgusting. I cannot stand it. But there's a reason behind it, guys. So Charlie goes off by saying, where were you when Edith was murdered? And Mrs. Badley's just like, oh, bless. Do you think you're going to solve the murder? And Charlie just, you can tell she's not enjoying interviewing this woman because of the way she's acting. And Mrs. Badley's like, bless. Would you like a piece of plum pudding? I won't tell anybody. Because Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without one of my plum puddings. And Charlie's like, no, I'd just rather you answer my questions. And so she cuts her a slice and kind of pushes her into a chair. And she goes, nah, just a little bit before dinner, and I won't tell anybody. And Charlie's like, look, I don't care about your plum pudding, okay? I just want to solve this mystery. And then Badley completely changes. Like, she is in front of Charlie, and then all of a sudden she's back over at the cutting board, like, just like that. And she's like, well, if you don't want to have any of my plum pudding, I don't want to talk to you at all. If you want to talk about a dirty, noisy, stupid little girl like Edith, then I don't want to talk to you now. Get out of my kitchen. And then Charlie's like, but Mr. Shaughnessy likes my pudding. He always says so. So just give the woman what she wants. And that's exactly what Charlie does. She's like, I will love a piece of your plum pudding. Oh, yes, I know you've always loved plum pudding ever since you were a little girl. So the doctor interviews Frederick next. And Frederick's a little more different because he is the chauffeur. And the doctor's like, okay, what do you drive? He goes, well, I drive a Chrysler. Okay. And what is the year? And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, what's the year? He goes, it's 1906. He goes, okay. So he asked him, like, who probably, you know who I am, you know my reputation. He goes, yes, you're the best amateur sleuth in London. And he goes, I thought I was from Scotland Yard. He goes, oh, no, you're too great for the police. And then he's like, okay, do you know any of my work? He goes, oh, yeah, I love the one you did with the 7 dials. And he goes, that was Agatha Christie. And then he's like, oh, well, I maybe it was a Christie. But he's like, and the doctor's like, Frederick, Agatha Christie was published in 1920, and this is 1906. How do you even know her? Well, maybe it's 1920. And he goes, and the Chrysler wasn't invented until several years after that. So how do you know what a Chrysler is? And he goes, did I say Chrysler? No, I meant a Bentley. I drive a Bentley. And so we kind of get this weird mismatch. I mean, you're trying to think that it is Frederick, but it's not, because even in his mind, he's like, something's just not right. And he's like, so you drive the Chrysler? And he goes, yeah, I drive the Bentley. The Chrysler hasn't been invented yet. And then he's like, Frederick, did you kill Edith? And he goes, no. And he's like, do you know who did? He goes, if I had to say one, I think it was Mary, the lady's maid. Shifty eyes? Well, you know better than me, doctor. All right, thanks, Frederick. So now we have Charlie, being forced to eat this plum pudding, and Mrs. Badley's like, "Aw, there you go, my poppet. Now you be careful not to chip your tooth on some of the bits inside, because back then they used to slip like little silver coins in the plum pudding. Oh, that's really great. Break tooth, get some viruses. Okay." And then Charlie starts eating it, and she likes it, and for some reason she starts morphing into this little girl, and she goes, will you always serve me plum pudding? Of course, my poppet. All that you want. Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without one of my plum puddings. And then Charlie she's like, where am I? What's going on? And then she's like, and Badley's like, oh, you're getting sleepy. Couple more bites and we'll get you straight off to bed. And then Charlie's like, Mrs. Badley, did you kill Edith Thompson? You know what, my dear? I didn't. And then she's like, do you know who did? Well, if I had to say, I think it was Mr. Shaughnessy. He's got shifty eyes. So Charlie goes off and she interviews Mary. Now we have to understand something very interesting here. Edith's body is still sitting in the scullery. And there's Mary washing the pots and pans. And it's really funny because then Mary's like, I don't deserve this. I put on, I help her lady with her wardrobe. So, I shouldn't be doing the manual labor. And Charlie asks her, were you friends with Edith? She goes, no, I wasn't. And she's like, can you tell me about how the investigation's going? And Charlie's like, I really don't know. I mean, did you kill Edith Thompson? No, I didn't. But I think I might know who did. And then she's like, I bet it was Edith. You know why? Because she's got shifty eyes. And Charlie's like, Edith's the one that was murdered, Mary. Oh, well, then I would think it was Frederick, the chauffeur. He's got shifty eyes. with Mary claiming that it was Edith that killed Edith. That didn't make any sense because she has shifty eyes. But then, of course, the doctor's trying to figure out why is it that some of the people are pointing out things in a year that don't exist. And at that moment, the clock strikes another hour, and then we hear another scream. So then we head back to the kitchen where we find Mrs. Baddeley on the floor. And so Shaughnessy, Mary, and Frederick come in, and they're like, oh my God, another murder. Oh. And so the doctor goes over to examine her, and she finds that she has been murdered by stuffing. Like someone stuffed her with her own plum pudding. And he's like, I'd stand back if I were you. This is not so good. Oh, to lose the scullery maid, but also to lose the plum pudding on Christmas. Well, what a way to go, says Mary. I couldn't think of a better way to be murdered. Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without one of her plum puddings. And Charlie's like, what is wrong with you people? And so the doctor's like, okay, everyone, can you just please leave so that we can figure this out? And, the doctor's like, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, why is it that when we arrive, we find Edith Thompson dead, and then we find Mrs. Baddeley dead an hour later? And Charlie points out, Doctor, that did not seem like an hour. I mean, yes, we were talking to everybody, but that only seemed like a few minutes. And the doctor's like, oh, Charlie, you are brilliant. Who's ever doing this isn't playing by the rules. They're trying to speed up time to, I guess, move things along. But why are they doing that? But also what's interesting is that they've noticed there's no clocks, and yet they can still hear the ticking of a grandfather clock. So the doctor and Charlie meet up in the foyer where the stairs lead up to the second floor. And so they call Mr. Shaughnessy out, and he's like, and the doctor's like, Shaughnessy, where's the grandfather clock? And he's like, what are you talking about? And he goes, the clock. I mean, there's no clocks here, and yet we can hear a ticking sound. And he goes, oh, well, there's no need to know the coming and passing of time. I mean, we know when the chimes go off that it's the next hour. And the doctor's like, well, you have a fob watch, so can we have it? And he goes, no. And so the doctor gets more insistent that Shaughnessy hands over his watch. And so Shaughnessy just, is like, no, I will keep my watch. You get away from me. And so the doctor's like, fine, then we're going to go talk to the Lord and Lady. And so he starts heading up the stairs until he hears the clicking of a gun. And Shaughnessy has a gun out on him. He's like, you will come back down here, doctor. We are not allowed to go upstairs until we are summoned. And he's like, Shaughnessy, give me the gun. And he's like, no. And so Charlie's like, doctor, stop. And he goes, fine, give me the watch. And everyone pauses like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you can't shoot me with a watch, Shaughnessy, so why don't you give me the watch and you keep your gun? And so Shaughnessy's like, oh, of course, you are absolutely right, sir. And so he hands him the watch and says if there's anything else he needs, come and find him. It's really strange. So, the doctor looks at the watch, and it's already, the passing of time, the hour's already gone 20 minutes. There's no way it's already been 20 minutes. But then as Charlie's talking, the second hand stops, and it's quivering. She's like, doctor, look. It's like it's watching us. No pun intended. He goes, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, a watch isn't sentient. It doesn't know what we're doing. And then all of a sudden, the watch starts speeding up fast. It starts to become a blur. And so the doctor calls. He's like, everyone, get in here now. I mean, something's happening. Because he's like, all the murders have happened on the hour. So we have just a couple of minutes until midnight. And so Shaughnessy comes in, Frederick comes in, Mary comes in, and he's like, what's going on in here? Like, what? We have chores that need to be done, doctor. And he's like, we need to all be together at once, or whatever, another murder is going to take place here. And Shaughnessy's like, this is ridiculous. Staff, return to your duties at once. And so they all just leave. They don't care. And then so Charlie's like, doctor, it's almost time. The second hand's just a blur. And the doctor's like, listen to me. We have to stop this before the chimes of midnight. And it's too late. The chimes go off, ding, ding, ding. But then they start hearing something. As the chimes go off, they start hearing something else other than chimes. They start hearing heartbeats. And then there's another scream. So they arrive back into the scullery where they find Edith, who has been, she's not dead this time. Well, she is dead, but not in the same way they first found her. They find her on the floor, suffocated with a sink plunger. Okay. This was a little hard. So, and Charlie's like, look, it's Edith. But she's dead, Charlie. But she was already dead. Well, now she's dead with the sink plunger on her face. And so everybody comes back in, including Mrs. Badley. And Charlie's like, she's alive too? And so they all start acting the same, like what's going on in here? Oh my God, there was a scream, and your scullery maid is dead. Oh no, Mary, it's all right. Oh, such a thing could happen in my kitchen with my plum pudding. Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without it. So the doctor pulls off the plunger, and he's like, it's impossible. And Shaughnessy points out, he's like, I safely assume that it was suicide, doctor. Well, no, you can't really kill yourself with a sink plunger. That's impossible unless someone's holding the other end. Yeah, so... So the doctor has to repeat everything, like, okay, with their amateur sleuths. And the thing that gets me is that Mary turns to Frederick and goes, I wonder who the killer will turn out to be this time. And so they go off, and he's like, I don't understand what's going on here, Charlie. So everything's back to normal. So we know that the murders happen on the hour. But now we're going back to Edith being the main first death. And Charlie's like, well, we know that Mrs. Badley is going to be murdered next, 11 o'clock, in the kitchen. So the doctor tells her to stay with her. And so he goes off to figure out a hunch. So when Charlie finds Mrs. Badley, she kind of is that same, like, would you want a piece of plum pudding? And she's like, no, I kind of want to talk to you a little bit. And she goes, oh, you think you're going to solve this little investigation? But then the scene changes. And Charlie can hear Edith going, Charlie, have you figured out who killed me? We're trying to figure that out, Edith. She's like, I'm just so sick of dying. You've got to remember me. You just got to remember. She's like, I do know you. You're Edith Thompson. We're just trying to figure out how you died. She goes, it doesn't matter how I died. I'm tired of dying. And then she goes back to normal, and Mrs. Badley's like, would you like another piece of plum pudding, seeing it's your favorite? The doctor finds Frederick and Mary together. And Mary's working on her needlework and everything, and Frederick, I guess, is looking out the window or something. I don't know. And he starts talking to them. And the doctor's like, Frederick, I want you to take me for a drive. And he goes, what? In the cold weather? It's a blizzard out there. And he's like, I gave you an order. And he goes, well, yeah, I'm supposed to obey all orders, but, I don't want to get cold and the car won't start. And then he tells Mary to open the door that leads outside. And she goes, we're not allowed to, doctor. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, our master has told us not to open the door or go out of this house. And so the doctor's like, well, I don't work for him, so I'll go out whenever I want. So he approaches the door. And Frederick's like, don't do it, doctor. And he picks up a fire poker. And he's like, our master has instructed that I hit you extremely hard with this fire poker if you go out that door. And then Mary stands up with her knitting needles going, oh yeah, and he told me to stab you as hard as I can with these knitting needles, sir. And he goes, and you're all willing to take this lordship's advice? You're going to kill somebody just because he tells you to? And they go, yes. So then he steps back and goes, okay, then forget it. I don't need to go outside. And so then they all go back to normal. Mary goes back to needlework, and Frederick puts down the poker. And then he's like, doctor, I have a question. Have I been murdered? And he goes, no. And he goes, good. And then he's like, doctor, we think we can help you. You see, me and Mary kind of have figured it out. We're the killers. So back where Charlie is, she keeps going in and out of this phase that she's becoming a little girl, but she can't figure out why Mrs. Badley's part of this. Eat some more plum pudding and don't chip your teeth on the silvery bits and everything. Finally, Charlie snaps out of it, and she's like, Mrs. Badley, your life is in terrible danger. And back where the doctor is, Frederick's like, look, we kind of figured this out because, we're in love. Me and Mary have had a bit of a fling. And then Mary's like, it's love, Frederick. Yes, it's that. So we had to get rid of her to keep our relationship a secret. And the doctor's like, wait, you saw Edith that's that big of a threat? And she goes, Edith, what are you talking about? We're talking about Mrs. Badley, that old sow in the kitchen. She caught us kissing, or I guess having sex. I don't know. And we wanted to silence her, but the doctor's like, Mrs. Badley's not dead yet. And they go, really? Oh, well, forget it then. We'd only kill Mrs. Badley. We wouldn't kill anybody else. And then they start hearing the chimes of the clock go off. And then Charlie's like, Mrs. Badley, listen to me. You're going to be killed. You've got to listen to me. You need to get out of this house. And she's like, no one's going to kill me during Christmas. Not when I'm making plum pudding. It's a secret recipe handed down. Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without it. And then they hear another scream. And so she's like, oh dear, what was that? And so Charlie and Mrs. Badley head off to, I guess, the front door where they are. And they see the doctor. Mary's crying, and Shaughnessy comes in. He says, what's going on in here? And Charlie's like, what happened, doctor? And the doctor's like, I really don't know what I saw, Charlie. I mean, first, Frederick just kind of went rigid, and then poof, he's on the floor. And he has tire tracks on his chest. Like, comical. Like how you see in old movies with the black tire tracks that don't look like tire tracks on someone's body. He goes, it just seems like, one moment he was okay and then the next minute he's dead. It doesn't make any sense. And Mary's like, oh, poor Freddie, killed by your own Chrysler or Bentley, whichever one it is. And then Shaughnessy's like, why are you crying, Mary? Stop that at once. And she goes, I can't help it, sir. We were in love with each other. Oh, for God's sakes, that's not true. A scullery maid in love with a chauffeur, the idea. But I'm the lady's maid. Am I only the scullery maid? Oh, well, never mind then. Frederick and I couldn't have loved each other. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. And Shaughnessy's like, good girl. And the doctor's like, and he's so confused by this. And then Shaughnessy's like, doctor, I think we can conclude that this was suicide. And the doctor's like, oh yeah, I figured it out. Frederick ran himself over with the Chrysler or Bentley and then put the car back outside and then laid back down and expired. And they're like, oh, what a horrible thing to happen. And so they kind of just go off again. And then Charlie just can't wrap her mind around it. She's like, doctor, this doesn't make any sense. Why is it now Frederick? And the doctor's like, I don't even think it matters anymore, Charlie. I don't think that the clues matter, the people matter anymore. Who's ever doing this, one, they're not playing by normal rules. They're making up rules as they go along. And the thing is, though, everyone is dying in their profession. Both Ediths have died in ways that a scullery maid would die, either by drowning in her own sink with a sink plunger. You had Mrs. Badley before being stuffed with her own plum pudding. And now Frederick getting run over by his own car. So they're not in pain. It seems like who's ever doing this is 1 minute they're alive and 1 minute they're dead. There's no suffering. But why? Why would you kill somebody in that type of way? And she goes, well, maybe if you enjoy killing. He goes, sadism? I just don't see that part of this, So the doctor goes off and Charlie is like, look, doctor, Edith is trying to communicate with me. She goes, I need to figure out a way to save her. And so with Mary thinking that she is the scullery maid, everyone's forgotten about Edith. But she's like, I will not forget about her. She goes, I will help her because I know her. And then the doctor's like, Charlie, it's 1906. It is 6 years before you're even born. You owe these people nothing. And she goes, I promise to help her, doctor. I will. And so she goes off back to the kitchen. And the doctor hears this maniacal laugh. And he goes, all right, come out of hiding. I refuse to play your game anymore until I am allowed to see the question master and his rules. And when no reply comes, the doctor goes off to find whoever's doing this. And when Charlie gets to the kitchen and sees the name Edith Thompson is gone. And so the scene changes back to that darkness, and then Edith's voice comes out and goes, Charlie, you've forgotten me. She's like, I'm trying to help you, Edith. She's like, you're just like everyone else. You never cared about me. And she goes, that it doesn't matter how I died, it's why I died, and you just will never remember me because I should never have trusted you. I should never have loved you. And if you want to remember me, then look at this. And then she sees this name scratched into the wood. Edward Grove. Edward Grove is alive. But there is no one there that's named Edward Grove. And everything just goes black for her. She just completely goes out of existence. And where the doctor is, he goes back up to the stairs and he's like, all right, I'm heading up these stairs. Is anybody going to stop me? So he goes up 1, 2, 3, 4. And he's like, come on now. I mean, you wanted to stop me before. Why are you not coming out of hiding? And so he starts going up, and all of a sudden you hear this door open, and you hear Shaughnessy, doctor, get away from those stairs. And then he points his gun at him, and he's like, you will come back down. And the doctor's like, there you are, Shaughnessy. I was wondering when you were coming. He's like, I'm very sorry, sir. I'm not as young as I used to be. You will come down those stairs. He's like, oh yeah, there's just a bunch of void and blackness up there. Been there, seen that. And he's like, Shaughnessy, Shaughnessy, keep your gun on me. But he's like, doctor, I'm not the murderer. He's like, oh, no, I'm not saying that you are. A well-bred butler like yourself. Who ever heard of the butler doing it? But I need you to keep that gun on me, just for a little while. And the Shaughnessy's like, what's happening to my staff, doctor? I feel like I'm losing control. He goes, don't lose control, Shaughnessy. And he's like, Shaughnessy, where are we? What do you mean, sir? Like, what is this place? He goes, well, this is Edward Grove, number 24. And so something kind of clicks in his head. Edward Grove. There's no other people here. The Lord and Lady doesn't seem to exist. But it seems that Edward Grove, the house, is somehow alive. And so the doctor's like, it's the house. Out of everything here, it seems preposterous, but the house. We're inside the house. And so he's like, it all makes sense. We have entered into a paradox where everything seems to be looped between 2 hours, 10 and midnight. And so all of a sudden Shaughnessy's like, doctor, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm getting a very powerful urge to shoot you in the head. And the doctor's like, just, hold yourself together there, Shaughnessy. And then we find Mrs. Baddeley chopping vegetables, and you hear this voice, who is kind of Shaughnessy's voice, going, chopping vegetables there, Mrs. Baddeley. Those carrots look good enough to eat. And he goes, why don't you leave your vegetables, grab your cover, and come kill the doctor? And then we see Mary doing needlework, and he goes, Mary, needlework again. Well, put down everything except for your needles, and come and kill the doctor. And so all the doors open, and Mrs. Baddeley and Mary are like, we've come to kill the doctor. We've come to kill the doctor. And Shaughnessy starts to become less worried and becoming more confident in killing the doctor. And the doctor's like, listen to me. You are your own free will. You need to fight this thing. And Shaughnessy's like, we have our orders from our master. And he goes, what does your master look like? You can't even tell me what he looks like. Is he old? Is he young? Is he fat? Is he bald? Like who is he? Doctor, we will kill you. And he goes, do it, Shaughnessy. And so Shaughnessy fires the gun, but the bullet vanishes. And the doctor's like, you can't hurt me, Edward Grove, not until the clocks chime. And so Shaughnessy takes out his watch, and he goes, well, then time will speed up, doctor. And the doctor tries to press them more as the time is going faster. He's like, listen, can't you just answer any questions about this place? I mean, Edith Thompson, who is Edith? And they were like, of course we have a master. Here is his daughter. And Charlie comes down the stairs, and she goes, what's going on, Shaughnessy? Oh, it's the famous amateur sleuth doctor. And he goes, well, we're about to kill him. Oh, well, don't stop me. And the doctor is surprised. He's like, Charlie, what are you doing? It's me. And then they all come at him as the chimes strike. And as the chimes are going off again, Charlie's mind clears, and she's like, doctor, I'm so sorry. I knew it was you, but yet I didn't know it was you. And so they enter into the scullery again and find Edith, well, this time bludgeoned to death with a broom handle. And the doctor's had enough. He's like, Charlie, something happened in this house. It's caused some kind of paradox. I can't explain it, but something so violent happened in this house that it caused the house to absorb the trauma and become sentient. Which, okay, let's pause right there, because this is so great. I never thought about it until I listened to the Chimes of Midnight just recently. Later on, when Charlie Pollard meets up with the 6th Doctor, Colin Baker, the first audio is called The Condemned, which is about an apartment complex which is possessed by someone who died. Now, I know it's not the same as Edward Grove, which we'll find out later on, is not possessed by someone dead. It was just possessed by trauma. Whereas in The Condemned, that building was possessed by the spirit of someone who had been murdered. I just found that very strange and very funny that they went from the Chimes of Midnight to The Condemned. It's really interesting, and we will get to that one. So the Doctor's had enough. He's like, Charlie, we need to get out of here. And she's like, you're going to run away? He goes, yes, there are mysteries that I cannot solve, and I think the more that we stay here, we're becoming part of this house. And in time, we may not be able to escape. And as he says that, the whole staff comes in. And he goes, and Shaughnessy's like, Doctor, you're not leaving us, are you? And Mrs. Bradley's like, are you leaving my puppet? I've got so much plum pudding to feed you. And so they back away into the TARDIS, and the Doctor's like, listen, I cannot save you people. Whatever it is, you are locked in a time loop that's going around and around. And they're all like, we know that, Doctor, but won't you take us with you? Won't you save us? Will we keep going around and around and around and around and forever? And he goes, I'm sorry, but I can't save you. And so he closes the door on them, and he takes off. Now, it's a very kind of dark tone to that, because you know the Doctor sounds defeated, but he's also angry with himself too, because either he's angry that he played along with this nonsense, or that he couldn't fix it. Pride. So all of a sudden Charlie's like, Doctor, do you hear that? They're gone at this point, but they start hearing that clock. And the Doctor starts panicking. It doesn't make any sense. And as he's trying to fight with the console, the pantry, the scullery, starts materializing around the TARDIS, like swallowing it up until it's gone. And the Doctor's like, I was wrong to think we could escape. We've taken the house with us. So when he opens the door, he sees the kitchen, or the larder, the scullery. And Charlie's like, let's just get back into the TARDIS because I can see it. And as she opens the TARDIS doors, it's still another scullery. And he's like, we're in a time loop and a spatial one as well. Every time we go through that door to the TARDIS, we're just going to find another scullery, another Lotta. We're outside of a millisecond, but we can't get out of that, if that makes any sense. And so the doors open again, and all the staff comes in and is like, Doctor, you're back. He's like, we thought you had escaped. Is there escape, Shaughnessy? Oh, no. But our master would like to speak with you. And so with a snap of a finger, Charlie vanishes. And she's gone. And he's like, and Shaughnessy's like, do not worry, Doctor. Our master does not want to hurt her. She is the reason for his birth. But now our master needs to speak with you. So they take him into, I guess, the dining room where the fire is. And then Shaughnessy looks at his watch and he goes, everyone bow down to his lordship. And so as they all say, good morning, or good evening, your lordship, the chimes go off, but they start getting warped, distorted. But you can still hear the chimes very long. And then Shaughnessy goes rigid, and then he's like, there you are, Doctor. And Doctor's like, Edward Grove, I assume. Where Charlie has gone, they've sent her back to the flip side in the darkness, where she sees Edith Thompson. And she's like, Charlie, I need to tell you why you're here and what's happened. And she's like, do you recognize me? And Charlie's like, yes, you're the cook in my father's home in Hampshire. And she goes, I knew you would remember me. But she's like, I don't understand. That was 1930. What are you doing here? And so Edith goes on by saying that she started out at Edward Grove as a scullery maid and then became a cook. That she went to Charlie's family and fell in love with little Charlotte Pollard. She was always nice to her. Everyone else bullied her and ignored that she even existed, but Charlie was always nice to her. That she loved her plum pudding. But the thing is that when Charlie got older, that adventure side, that sense of being trapped, overwhelmed her. And that's when she got on the R101, which is what Storm Warning was about. And she, on Christmas Eve to Christmas Day, they found out that the airship had gone down. Everyone had died, and they found Charlie's diary in the wreck. So they didn't find her body, they just found her diary. But they assumed that she was dead. But that sent Edith into this type of depression that she didn't want to live anymore. And so she cut her wrists and died. And she said it was a very painful, slow, agonizing death. But Charlie's like, why did you do that? And she goes, I loved you, Charlie. You were the only one that gave a damn about me. And if you were not in this world, I didn't want to exist. But you're back. You're alive. So what does that make me? If you're alive, if I'm alive, that means I'm alive. But if you're dead, I need to know if I'm dead. So as the doctor's talking to Edward Grove, he's trying to make sense of what happened. He's like, if Charlie is the reason of your birth, Charlie wasn't even born in 1906. But Edward Grove is like, it has nothing to do much about her. It's the fact that Edith Thompson committed suicide after Charlie died on the Air 101, but she appears in 1906 with Edith Thompson nullifying her death, but causing a schism in the timeline. Because now Edward Grove, and that little bit of temporal energy caused him to absorb that trauma. But she didn't even die there. But for some reason in this house, it absorbed the trauma of her death and brought him to life. Now, is he living? No. He's more of just kind of like a void, if you will, that thinks it's alive. So the doctor's like, so if I could stop Edith from killing herself, then that'll stop you. That'll stop the time loop. And Edith and Edward Grove is like, you can try, doctor, but you can't kill yourself here because I'll just bring you back. And none of my staff members will kill you. Which is very true. But there's one thing that Edward Grove did not realize when he took control of Shaughnessy's body, is that Shaughnessy is a well-bred butler. He's supposed to do whatever a gentleman tells him to do. So he gets through to Shaughnessy and tells him to throttle him to death because the chimes are still going off. There's still a chance that the doctor can die, and that warped sense of the chime from 10 to 11. And so Shaughnessy grabs the doctor by the throat and starts choking him. And he's like, I will stop you, Edward Grove, one way or another. And so the doctor dies. Well, Charlie is still fighting the realization that she died. She's remembering the flames of the R101 engulfing her, even though she survived with the doctor. But that one instant that she had died starts engulfing everything about her. It starts consuming all the things that she had done with the doctor. She is dead. And Edith's putting it in her head, like, if you're alive, if you're meant to be alive, then I'm meant to be alive. But if you're dead, I should be dead too. Pick one. You can't have both. And so then Charlie just completely blacks out. And Edith asks, what of the doctor? And she goes, I don't know who the doctor is. And so she picks up a piece of glass, Edith, and says, slice your wrists. Kill yourself. In this loop, this nightmare. And then I'll kill myself as it's supposed to be. And then the doctor, as kind of a ghost, appears. And he's like, Charlie, listen to me. You are alive. We fixed the timeline. Yes, there may be some ramifications by this. But it's because I brought you here by accident that we caused this time loop. She's like, I don't know you. I died on that airship. He goes, Charlie, listen to me. You didn't. I got you out of there. We went and fought the Cybermen on the Sword of Orion. We stopped the curse of Count Orsino. All the stuff with the Brigadier in Malebolgia. And then, of course, we got to be in Orson Welles. All that stuff would mean nothing. I would just be an old man floating in a box in space. You mean something, Charlie. And so Charlie's like, I can still feel the flames, doctor. I can't fight this pain. And and the doctor's like, Charlie, listen to me. You survived. We will fix this. I need you. And so Charlie's like, I choose to live. And then she looks at Edith and she's like, I choose to live. That means you should choose to live too. But then Edith starts going back into the darkness because Edward Grove is starting to consume her. Because she's like, I'm never going to see space. I'm not going to amount to anything. And the doctor's like, yes, you will, Edith. You are something. You are not nobody. And then at the same time, you have all these voices like, a scullery maid. You're so stupid. No one will ever love you. And the doctor's like, you will amount to something, Edith. You will. You just have to love yourself and believe that you want to live. And so she does choose. Right as the chimes hit midnight, and Edward Grove starts screaming like, Doctor, no, please, have her kill herself. It's her life or mine. I want to live. And the doctor's like, you have never lived, Edward. You are not a living being. You are a house. And I'm sorry that this is going to happen to you, but this has to be. And so Edward Grove just completely disintegrates. Not the house. The house remains the same, but the entity, the dark void that was possessing the house just vanishes, breaks up into the ether. And so we hear all the stuff kind of breaking up around him, and the Charlie and the doctor find themselves in the TARDIS. And they start hearing singing. It's Edith Thompson. She's singing Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And of course they hear Shaughnessy coming in there yelling at her that she's making too much racket and everything. And so when the doctor and Charlie come out, you know, Shaughnessy's like, what are you doing here? Oh, your lord and lady wanted us to come down here and check on your scullery maid, and she is doing just a wonderful job. And so they make Shaughnessy say that she's doing a great job, which makes Edith so proud of herself. And Charlie goes over and tells her, she's like, Edith, you are somebody. You're worth something, okay? You are not nobody. You are not no one. You are Edith Thompson. And so Edith's like, thank you, miss. And so as the chimes hit midnight, it is Christmas Day. And so Shaughnessy kind of welcomes the doctor and Charlie to come join his lord and lady upstairs. But the doctor's like, nope, I like the anticipation of the waiting of Christmas rather than the actual day. Come on, Charlie, we gotta go. And so they hop back into the TARDIS and vanish. And Edith just starts singing Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and she's just happy. She's content. She loves herself. She knows that she's going to make a difference one day. Even if she may never see space, she may never see the beauties of other worlds, but she will love herself, and that's all that matters. Well, unfortunately, now comes a very difficult moment for the doctor. Charlie points out she can still feel the flames of the R101 eating her. That pain is still there, but now it's awakened. And she wants to know what that means. If she has died but she has lived, what does that mean for her now? Can she go home? Can she even go to Singapore? Are the Time Lords coming after her? And the doctor's like, Charlie, there will come a time that we have to talk about this, but it's not now. And that's it, guys. So if you're waiting for the transcripts and everything that I usually do after these, it's not coming. Nope. I've decided not to do any of the transcripts like we do, like going over the illustrations, because I will be doing the full transcripts of the Chimes of Midnight, full voices. I'm going to figure out the sound effects, but that'll come in December. Hopefully I have enough time to finish it. So that's it, guys. And like I said, this one is an amazing audio drama. I don't think I did it as much justice as it deserves. And unfortunately, the CD itself is still around $80, guys. Over 100. Sometimes they're selling for over 300. I honestly think that you can download it from Big Finish Productions, and I urge you to listen to this one. And oh wow, so we have now gotten past pre-Zagrarius. So now we're getting up to that point with Zagrarius. And the next one, Seasons of Fear, is a very long drama. And I will be starting those illustrations probably in September. And I will see you guys then. And this is Mr. D of Who's Corner. I will see you guys next time.